Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to greet you today at America House Lviv on this rainy day. Thank you so much for making it. To everyone who is here offline and to people who are joining us from other cities online. My name is Ira Lobanok, and I'm a co-founder of Porichka Music Community. And this is our second lecture of a series of lectures with American music professionals. Today, I'm happy to introduce you to Darek Mаццоне, who is a globally recognized filmmaker, DJ, and radio host, and whom I had a great pleasure to meet this April at Tallinn Music Week. Hi, Darek.
Hello.
Hi. Today we're going to make this meeting as kind of a question answers thing, so please be active. Darek will talk a bit about his background and his journey as a music cultural manager and a DJ and host at KEXP. And he'll also talk probably about his project SAMA, where he curates musicians and art. And after that, please be active, and people online also please be active. Write your questions online, and if you have questions, please raise your hand, and I will give you the microphone. Okay? Great, Darek, I'm giving the floor to you.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you virtually. This is interesting because this reminds me of COVID. The project that was just mentioned, SAMA, I started during COVID when you had to stay home a lot. And so I was focused on connecting with artists and continuing the work that I was doing at KEXP. But I found through the magic of technology that we could record natively in the cloud. And so I could talk to anybody in the world, have performances happen, and with artists literally from all over the world, and still build a weekly show and an audience around that at a time when people were stuck in their homes. They were lucky enough to have homes to connect. So it's a little bit of irony and kind of a bittersweet moment because we hopefully won't be going back to those times. So my name is Darek Mаццоне. I live in Seattle. I live in the United States. I was born in Poland, in northern Poland, and Gdynia and Gdansk area and Sopot. I work in music, and I work in technology, and I work in film. And I found myself in a really interesting space where this little radio station that I started working at in 1992, I wouldn't say working because it was a volunteer position. It was a little college radio station that seems to have created a pretty powerful impact. We have a significant following, I think like over 3.6 million on our YouTube channel. And so the thing that's become interesting is that most people don't even know that we're a radio station. They just know us through our YouTube channel. We're an actual radio station. So one of the things that's come up through this is the reality that since we are a radio station, when artists send us their video files or their video, not even their file, their video links, we don't know what to do with this because we're a real radio station. So you have to actually make a song, make a record, record it, and get it to us. And then if we like it, if it's good, if it connects with us in some form or another, and it's a complicated recipe of how that connection is made, we will then listen to it, and then we'll play it on the radio. And once that song is played on the radio, the actual radio station, I'm older, so radio is like this. You turn a knob and it turns on and turns off. That's when there's a possibility of you getting onto our YouTube channel. And so this is something that I need to stress because right now we're living in an interesting time when making music is really easy. I have a device here it's called the phone, but I use it as a phone maybe 10% of the time. The other things that I use it for are a myriad of things. It's my travel agent, it's my speaking device, it's my text device, all of these different things. My recording device, it's my editing suite also. So once this thing is in my hands and I'm actually able to explore music through it and everything else, and if something resonates with me, we suddenly now can have a relationship because then once I really like a band and I feel that they're doing really powerful, interesting work, then we become advocates for that band. We become advocates for the the musicians, and for me, the culture behind them, and the country behind them. Because that's one of the things that happens when you become a global platform such as KEXP. You realize that the work that you're doing can reach a pretty significant audience. And so, going back to how easy music is to make. In the past, you needed to go to a recording studio, and so that means you needed to convince somebody to record you. You needed to make a record, put that record out, get that record into a record store, and convince the record label, whoever, to put that record into a limited amount of a bin, like as in this is the how much space I can put, like into a space, into a shelf, and then people come in and buy that record. That doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you still have record stores per se, but we're living at a time when there's 150,000 songs uploaded to Spotify every single day. Now imagine that in a record store. Imagine that as a DJ trying to listen to 150,000 songs a day. That's crazy making. It's impossible. But that's the reality that we're in right now, is that there's so much stuff being generated, because it's easy to make it. I can make it on my phone. Anybody can make it. And suddenly, because you can make it and it's so easy, it's expected that everybody's going to be listening to it. And suddenly, because you made a song, it's expected that you're now going to have a career as a musician, and you're going to give up your day job, and it's going to be easy breezy. It's never easy. It's always hard. It always takes work. And to get your music to somebody such as myself and others takes a lot of work, and it requires you to actually develop, a following, develop listeners, develop fans that really care about your work. Once those fans, those people around you that feel like, okay, this is great, I'm going to go see you in a show, I'm going to support you, I might buy a t-shirt or something, then I get to hear about you in one form or another. Just because you made a song in your bedroom doesn't mean that suddenly you're a established musicians. Sometimes, but rarely. You still have to like do the work and show myself and others that you actually build a community around you. You build people that want to listen to you. And it's not just your family, which is great. It's a beautiful start, but it's important for you to, you know, develop and build a scene, because one of the things that happened in the past, and it's also important to have it in the future, is when you are making music, it's not just for yourself. It's for music. It needs to be heard. It needs to be experienced. And once it's experienced, you're actually building a scene around you. You're building a community of like-minded people that love what you're doing or like what you're doing and are willing to support it, so that you can continue to do that. And that's the magic part, is that you want to be sustainable enough so that you can like make another record and make another record. But by doing that, you're actually building a scene, you're building a community, and through that, you're actually building something that people from all over the world might start paying attention to. That's the story of Seattle. So, more about me. I was born in Poland. I moved to the United States when I was 9 years old. I moved from a communist country. I didn't speak English, and I ended up in a completely different culture. I grew up under communism. I grew up in Poland, and suddenly I'm in America. Very much a different kind of lifestyle, very diverse country. It was magical. It was interesting. It was my first time to be around so many people from different parts of the world. I lived in Boston, which was a great town. It's a working town, but it also has some huge universities. So I was able to meet people from all over the world. Um, in 1992, I decided to uh, drive around the country. America is one of those amazing places, and I highly recommend this for anybody, a band or whoever coming here. Get into a car and drive around this country. It's gigantic, and the difference between, let's say, Boston and New Orleans and Los Angeles and Seattle and Austin and New York is like different countries. They all speak the same language, but their cultures and ideas and how they live their life is very different. So, highly recommend that. So, I drove all over the country. My car broke down outside of Seattle in 1992. Now, 1992 is a really interesting time for Seattle because things were really bubbling up. Things we take for granted now, things like Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks that we know, but also music. grunge was just bubbling up. You had a really interesting scene. And suddenly I ended up in a city that became kind of like a cultural center for the world for a while. And it was also it was a growing town, so it was cheap. And that's one of the magical things also in these kind of situations. In order for all of this to work, all this magical recipe of art, culture, music, you got to keep the rents down so people can work together, live together. Seattle's not like that so much anymore. Around it, it still is, but the center of the town has gotten really expensive. But the core, the culture, the music, the stuff is there. KEXP is still there. My project SAMA is still there that I'll talk about a little bit more. But I ended up in '92 in Seattle at this insane, amazing place where if you wanted to do something, you just started doing it, and if people were interested in doing it, they will help you. They'll say, "Yeah, I got some time. I got some energy." So I ended up in a really interesting place at an interesting time, where suddenly the people that you see in the magazines and see in the videos, they're your neighbors, they're your friends. They became a really powerful community. You start meeting people from Nirvana, Pearl Jam, etc. You see, Bill Gates getting a hamburger someplace. You see Jeff Bezos driving around. It was one of those places where it wasn't so hierarchical as you find in other places. People still felt like they were part of Seattle, part of a community. And KCMU was there. And I was listening to KCMU, which became KEXP. And I was like, this is great. I was doing radio in Boston at a great freeform station called WMFO. And I was like, I have a broadcast license. Let me go do some radio at KCMU. I did the overnight, which is how you proved yourself in radio back day. It was like, all right, you want to do a show? We got 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. On a Monday, which was my slot. And I was working at a full time at an advertising agency at that time. So it was pretty crazy. But I was younger. I could do it. And then, the only employee at the station was Don Yates. He was our music director. And Tom Morrow was the other employee too, but he was working at the NPR station, the news radio station also. So it was all volunteers. They asked me like, "Well, you're playing a lot of international music. Do you want to do an international show, a world music show?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And so I moved to Tuesdays, which is where I'm still at, and I started playing music from all over the world. And it was an interesting time because world music was just moving, bubbling up, and suddenly, but it was still expensive. I had a full time job, so I could afford to buy these records, buy these CDs, because the only way you could get this music is by traveling or by spending a fortune on imports, and I did because I was crazy. I should have invested that money, but hey, you do what you do, and I started playing this music, and it suddenly became really popular, more and more popular, and then another thing happened is that some of these artists started coming to Seattle. Now, when you think about Seattle and you think about the United States, you think about New York, Chicago, LA mostly. Seattle is a great town, but it's kind of like far away in the corner. And so, because of the work that we were doing at KCMU, then KEXP, artists felt like, hey, wait a second, we could actually come here and play. There's an audience, they'll come to our shows. And one thing led to another, and suddenly we had more shows. Womat played here for a few years, and it was an opportunity for artists from different cultures to come and perform. And that was kind of like in the back of my head for a while, where I was like, "Hey, wait a second, this could be a thing," because the magic of having a live show with a band from a country you've never heard from. You might not know their culture or their history, it doesn't matter. Something magical happens. You fall in love with that band, you fall in love with the people around you, and then you fall in love with yourself. And I realized that, wait a second, I need to do more of this. This is like the next evolution of what I want to do here. I still love doing radio, I'm still on it, but I want to find ways to bring artists in from different parts of the world because it's a great way to connect and it's a great way for people to learn about each other that counters xenophobia, counters otherism, counters, just it gives you a sense of shared humanity. And so I started SAMA, SAMA, which means together in many different languages. And now we're putting on beautiful shows. We have artists from Pakistan coming in 2 weeks. We have artists from Estonia. The band Pulup is coming in. And obviously, we work with Daka Braka and Doc Daughters, Marina Krutby, and like, okay, let's bring these people in and have them perform, not just for people that know them, but for people that might not know them. But suddenly, that music becomes a really powerful way for people to learn about each other, learn about each other's cultures, become curious, which is the magical part of all of it, and then want to spend time and want to support them at an emotional level. So we're actively engaged in bringing more, especially Ukrainian artists coming through, and trying to find ways to connect these audiences, not just with the Ukrainians, but everybody around you. We just had Krutby come through, and she did a beautiful performance. Half the audience was non-Ukrainians, and it was gorgeous. It was a really beautiful time. And also now with Duck Daughters, also that's happening. And as always, anytime an opportunity like that happens, we try to get them into KEXP. Now, KEXP is an interesting thing because we specifically have decided to stay relatively small. We become really quite a powerful platform. So other large platforms such as Vice and others have come to us and go like, hey, let's partner together. Let's collaborate, which just seems to be an interesting European term that I finally figured out what exactly that means. It's more like a monetary exchange than it is an actual collaboration, but that's fine. We've specifically said like, no, 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 no. We're on our own little path here, and we're gonna stay small, and we're gonna try to figure out how to grow this audience in an organic way, and we've been successful with it. We have one video crew, and we, I'm one of a bunch of different DJs, and we're all trying to vie for these in studios. Hey, this band is coming through. They're interesting for this reason and that reason and this reason, and then we come together and we're like, okay, that's a good band. Let's invest the time and money and energy to do a video with them, record that. We have a great crew. Kevin Sucks, our audio engineer, is phenomenal. He's able to work with a whole bunch of different genres, but we're actually able to find the bands that we like, advocate for them, and then bring them in to our YouTube, to our studios in the Seattle Center, and create that videos. Now, a lot of people ask me, is like, how do I get, how does my band break into that? Every DJ is going to be a little different. For me, the most important part is like, is there something about you that is a little different? Is it something about you that tells me about where you're from? If you're a band that really loves, let's say, the Strokes, or even the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, or you know Metallica, and you do your version of Metallica, that's not really interesting to me because we already have Metallica. So if you're like your version of Metallica, there might be a DJ that loves that, but for me, no. But if you're a band from Ukraine that is doing something that tells me about Ukraine, that gives me the history, like Duck Daughters, or somebody that playing in a bandura, then I'm curious because you are telling me where you came from, not what you like, not the fact that you can cover a particular song a great way. What is it about you that that really, really will move me and move the audience that I'm cultivating and building, because I want them to be curious about Ukraine. I want them to be curious about your history. I want them to be curious about where you might be going with that history. This is important to me because it is an opportunity to create something that is lasting, something that that can really resonate with people who might not, because people understand, 3-chord guitars, drums, bass, etc., because we have it. But if you're playing different instruments, or you're telling a really interesting story, I just interviewed the college orchestra. I found that was really interesting, their instrumentation and how they were connecting. Okay, let's explore that a little further. I'm not being dogmatic about it. I'm not like a folklorist that it has to be like the way the old masters did in the villages. It could be hip hop, it could be electronic music, it could be rock, it doesn't matter. But you're telling something with your music that takes me on a journey. And so that is the main thing that I'm kind of like spending time and trying to figure out, where is this particular form of music going. And I'm finding this all over the world right now. It feels like a generational experience, either millennial or Gen Z or whatever you want to call it. A lot of artists are trying to find where they're from, not where what their parents or grandparents emulated from a cultural perspective, a musical perspective. I grew up on in the Eastern Bloc, and I understand. 1989, the wall came down. Nobody cared about what the Soviets were doing. They wanted to be, sound like the Cure, the Smiths, or whoever was popular at that time. But after a while, it's just like, okay, but that's their story. What is my story here, and how does that work? And I'm seeing this manifesting in bands from all over the world, and I think that's a really interesting time to make this music happen and present this music, because this is one of the things that's going to make you interesting and bubble you up at a time of 150,000 songs uploaded to Spotify every day. And a lot of them sound the same because they're made in a bunch of presets on these devices, whether it's whatever platform you're making music on. And so you want to have a story, and that's one of the things also that's important in the context of trying to get to me and others like me, is what's your story? It's like, what is it about you that compels me to spend time with you? And especially in the context of social media, this is really personal. Back in the day, you would never get close like this to a band. They wouldn't be coming out like this. They wouldn't be sharing that stuff with you, because it would be them on stage. You get their record, you read the liner notes, you listen to it over and over again. It's a different kind of experience right now. And in order to be able to connect, you need to have a story. And that story now leads people to the music as often as the music leads them to the bands. So it's a really interesting time in this space, as we're seeing a lot of technology, a lot of cultural shifts, a lot of things changing. Uh, but it's also the most interesting time to make music and to make the ecosystem around music, film, as an example. Everybody needs a video in one form or another. Everybody needs a social media platform. Everybody needs to connect on that social media platform in a authentic, organic way, so that those fans can have an experience with you. There's a lot of transitions. Anybody tells you that they know what's going to happen isn't really telling you the truth, because we're in a space right now where everything is in flux. But the music stays true. The music is a pathway. It's a window into a culture, and it's a window into people's soul and people's hearts. So this is why artists continue to make it, and this is why I advocate for them on a radio, and I try really hard to find ways to bring them to the stages here in my home in the Pacific Northwest. And that's kind of my story. I know I meandered a bit, but there's a lot to cover, and I just wanted to give you a bit of a highlight.
Thank you, Derek. Do we have any questions at the moment? I wanted to ask you one question that a lot of musicians ask me when they want to export their music and go and play internationally. They are worried that if they play music in Ukrainian, then it's going to be a barrier for them to export their music. What do you think? Does it stop you, from thinking that the band can make it out outside of of Ukraine?
This is the constant question. Do I not? Do I sing in Ukrainian? Do I not sing in Ukrainian? It's a tough one, because if you don't sing in Ukrainian, then are you actually singing the song? Because a language is a culture, is a it's a window into something that is uniquely Ukrainian. I am leaning now on artists singing in Ukrainian, because it feels like it's a differential for them, and it makes me curious about them. I've had experiences with artists who were told by producers, you can't do this, you got to sound like everybody else. You got to sound like the hit stars, because that's commercial radio, commercial music. It's like, once you have a hit, everybody tries to emulate it. When I got here in Seattle, a whole bunch of artists came through and people started to move to Seattle because they wanted to be discovered in Seattle. And they lost their identity. They just sounded like everything else that was here. So, it's a tough one. I would lean on starting with Ukrainian and push on that as much as possible, because the thing that's going to break you is your story. The thing that's going to build an audience around you is how you're communicating with them, how you're connecting with them. And the reality is that we're dealing with localization instantaneously now. Like we're living in an interesting time where things that would have been science fiction 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, we take for granted now. So if there's something you want to say in your music in Ukrainian and you want it to be translated, that's just an app and make it not work. But if you want to really break through, I would lean in Ukrainian. And then maybe, if you're feeling like, okay, I want to do a song in English, then do a song in English. I'm not going to tell you what to do or not to do. But the thing that makes you unique, the thing that separates you from another band singing in English about your heartbreak or whatever's going on is the fact that you're Ukrainian. It's like we get I'm going to swear, we get a ton of bands that sound exactly the same. They just happen to be from different countries, but they literally sound the same.
Thank you. There is a question from Leonid from Odessa on the chat. He says, I'm a fan of Seattle supergroup Master Musicians of Bukake. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Their last record was 10 years ago. Do you know something about them? It would be awesome to hear something new about the band.
Yeah, they're great. They're really, they're a very interesting band made up of great musicians doing a whole bunch of different stuff. But they don't need to make this music. I mean, they're musicians. One of them lives in Cairo half the time. The other one, they started Sublime Frequencies, a great little record label. They're doing different things in their lives. They might come together. I'll let them know that you're a fan. There's other fans out there. But this is interesting because that's the other thing that is intriguing about this relationship that people have right now with musicians and the industry is that you create a sense of expectation. If you hold back on releasing records. There are festivals right now that take a year off just to create a sense of like, okay, I want this. Where is it? Where is it coming? When's the next thing going to happen? They're fabulous, but it's not like, this isn't their day job. I know some of these artists, they're doing this because they get together. There's a moment and they're like, okay, it's time for us to make something new. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Another question from Leonid. What are the most interesting young bands from 2020s that, in your opinion, make music as art instead of content?
Music. Out of Ukraine or just in general all over the world?
I think all over the world, yeah.
From right now, for me, it really isn't tied to a band. Like I'm in an interesting, when I started, this is a funny story. When I started collecting music, I kept all my music next to me all the time because it was this magical thing. They were like cassettes and records and CDs. So I started looking into like, okay, this is really interesting. What's going on here with this? Why am I resonating with this form? Because I was reading, I was watching films, but something about music just connected me. Right now, I'm looking at scenes in different countries and what is happening with those scenes in different countries. And it's all different types of genres. So I would say look into Tallinn, look into the things that are coming out of Seoul, look at the things that are coming out of Beijing right now. Really interesting scenes, especially out of Beijing, because they got their music through recycled cassettes. Like there was a cultural revolution and there was no importing of any Western music. You might know the story, but it bears repeating. Cassettes are made out of plastic. The way they work in the music industry is that the cassettes are then, this is CDs also. Once you can't sell them, you have a discount for them. They're called cutouts. They would do like a little slice in a cassette and they would sell them for like 99 cents. All those cassettes went to China in the late 80s, early 90s for recycling. And there were little pop-ups of these stores that would take these cassettes and sell them. And so there's a whole generation of kids in China that learned music in a 5-year to a 10-year period. So this is the history of recorded music, like from 1920 all the way to 1990. So they went from Jelly Roll Morton to Soundgarden in the same period. And the music that's coming out of there and the art that's coming out of there is really, really interesting. And the things that are coming out of right now in Rotterdam is really interesting. And at Kampala, Uganda, with Dengue Dengue and other bands that are coming out of this whole really interesting scene. In Lisbon, there's a label called Principe, which is in the neighborhood of Principe, which is a really interesting hybrid of music from Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde, the expats, and Portugal, which that's I find really interesting, is when it's just like a really interesting mix of cultural influences. DJ Danny Fox doing some really interesting work with music and art and film. And then you've got a really intriguing scene coming out of San Basilico de Palenque, which is in Colombia, which is an escaped slave community from the 1800s that has its own language and culture that through the internet is making music, and a band called Combiles Ami, which is its own hybrid. And through that, they have a cultural center and a collection of videos that they're putting out and now starting to tour. And with that tour, it's dance, music, art, all of these different things that literally would have never been discovered. Like there was no way this really interesting scene would have bubbled up so that I'm telling you about it in Ukraine. This is the thing that's happening isn't even tied so much to a particular band. It's looking at the ecosystem and the support around that ecosystem that is really creating some really interesting work. And the other part that's important is that it's not just the musicians. The thing about that is, like, once you have a successful music scene, then you've got artists, you've got filmmakers, you've got sculptors, you've got a whole ecosystem that is supporting that. And out of that, you're going to see a whole bunch of really interesting things start manifesting. And then the last place that I'm trying to remember is Marrakesh. Marrakesh, Morocco has got a really interesting scene that's tied to music. Obviously, it's phenomenal history and really interesting hybridization of its tradition and new forms. And there's an artist that I do remember called Guedra Guedra out of that scene. That's really intriguing.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, we have questions. Can you please introduce yourself and then ask a question?
Yes, hi. My name is Roman. Surname a bit difficult. Garachowski. For you, from a person from Poland, it may sound a little bit.
Garachowski is dobrze.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a band which is called Dromoza, and during last approximately 5 years, we've been promoting our music in the radios. We've been just sending out the music, but about a year ago, Apple made available statistics to the musicians which radios are broadcasting the music. And it was a great surprise for me to find out that some of my tracks, which actually are not broadcasted in Ukraine, are broadcasted somewhere in the USA or in Canada. Like, for example, Radio Free Otaku. I don't know what is the radio station, but they're broadcasting my track every 2 weeks. And my question is, thank you, I'm not for this. What is interesting for me? I understand that recently, at least last years in Ukraine, radios are very much focused on Shazams and TikTok. But what I see that some small radios in the USA and in Canada are broadcasting the track simply because someone likes it. Because I don't see TikToks, I don't see Shazams, even in Ukraine. But I see that some person for second year is broadcasting the track once a week, and it brings no signs even for me, like a musician, that it is broadcasted. It's interesting for me how an editor in the radio station decides we will put this track today, and for example, in 6 months we take it out, or we put it twice more often, or we take another track of this band. How the decisions are taken when there are no, say, practical signs of the performance? How you measure it?
I mean, this is the place we're in right now. I mean, I am an individual. I have a weird skill where if I like music, I really like it, and then I have some channels that I'm working for and building, and I play it, and then and then I put it out through a playlist, and that's generated, and then I put it out through a Mixcloud per se, and then if I want, if I have the time, and so it's really depends on, like, now I've met you, so now now this song might have a name to a face and anything. It's like, in many ways, it's like the connection that you're making with the DJ is going to get that song played in some form or another. As far as like how you measure it and per se, I mean, you kind of have to. Back in the day when you had CDs, you had IRC codes, and so you could find out that this record is actually being played because it would show up on the CDDB database or Music Brains or etc. It's different right now because SoundCloud doesn't really generate that kind of code and everything. An interesting side note with that, and this is important, is that um, this is how we find out that when people buy CDs at shows, less than 2% of them ever get opened and less than 1% of them ever get played. So that relationship that people have with music is still there. They want it. They want something of that, but they don't have the devices to play it on. So it's an interesting thing to think about, is in, like, in the age of streaming, where you would, like, to our friend with his band, you have this song that suddenly, how is this being played in North America and Canada? What's going on here? It used to be a process. You would have a record label. That label would then get it to a DJ and push that DJ and would get it in nightclubs or whatever was going on with that. Everything is in flux right now. There might be some time in the future where things are, you know, this is everything needs to be categorized a particular way. And so you would see that. But right now it's a little bit like the Wild West. I don't know. I don't have an answer. Like, we get stuff sent to us all the time. I travel a lot. And so I am picking up things. I'm listening to stuff. I'm connecting with people. They'll send me files. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool. They catch me in the morning. I have had my tea and I'm listening to a whole bunch of music. And then I put it out there. But it also depends. Also, you kind of have to work. You have to look for it a little bit right now. It's a little bit like mining. If you're, as an artist, you need to find ways to see how you can find your music, and whether it's through certain keywords. This is one of the things that's interesting about AI platforms like ChatGPT, language models like ChatGPT and Claude and DeepMind right now, DeepSeek. You can create, little programs to find your music and see what's out there and tell people about it. But I don't have like a system in place.
So just as far as I understand, still their personal, say, relationship or personal connection with the person who takes the decision is still quite important.
Yeah, I mean, this is different kind of radio. KEXP and SAMA, the things that I do is very different. Commercial radio, you're still dealing with, not that much adventuring going on in there. The fastest growing genre in the United States right now is country music, classic country music. Not classic as in like old school, but it's country music. Country music radio stations are popping up, per se. You're seeing this in different shows. It's a connection that people are having through this, and people that listen to country music tend to listen to country music at commercial radio, and they tend to buy the beer that country star is promoting, etc. It is a connection. It's not very interesting music. I mean, it's fine, but it doesn't really evolve very well. It's very much a particular thing. I don't want to be quoted as like country music is horrible. I love country shows, etc. But it doesn't really change very much. It's because it's commercial. And so you want to sound like the next hit over and over again, because in that industry, it's not, if you're a hit maker, an artist that's doing well, you have an entire industry around you that depends on you doing well. You have managers, agents, chefs taking care of you, etc. So it's a little bit risk averse, whereas what we're looking at is much more. We're I'm focused on more experimentation. I'm focused on more risk taking.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that maybe in Ukraine we have more commercial radios. If someone knows more about it, let me know. But I think we have most of them are commercial radios. There are like not a lot of community radios like Skovoroda radio. I think it's a community radio because it's like supported and you can. There's like a Patreon for them, and they are a bit more free in what they can choose. But the rest, the commercial radios, yeah, they need some hits so that the people who want to sell commercials will come to them because they are top radio that everyone is listening to. So yeah, it's it's kind of a business venture thing.
Hi. Independent radio stations in Ukraine, I think they started internet radio stations, and not really long time ago, maybe 5 years, maybe 5-6 years tops, not normal. Actually, hi, my name is Olena, and I also wanted to ask a question. So as you told your story, and you said that Seattle grew more expensive and gentrificated. So I wanted to ask, what was the way for KEXP and you personally to stay independent? Did you take any special measures for that? How as Seattle changed?
Oh, okay. So KEXP has never been my job. I've always worked in other fields, and I found myself in certain situations. When I got here, I started working at an advertising agency as a producer, director, art director, and that agency became really popular because the industry here was growing. And so you had Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, etc. These were clients. And so I was working at KCMU, and I found like, hey, wait a second, this is cool. Let's help this station, because we're doing cool stuff. We're like a really interesting station that's supporting local music. And that's the other part that's super important, is like, you want to support the scene. That's why I keep harping. It's like you want to build something. You can complain. It's easy to complain. It's hard to do stuff. So do stuff. Don't just complain. Actually build your scene. And this was one way that I could help build KEXP. So I got pro bono. You guys know pro bono? It's free work. I got free work from the advertising agency. We'd be making a commercial, and then it'll be like, hey, we got the crew. We got some extra stuff here and some budget. Let's make something cool for KCMU. And that became a thing. And then when I moved to the technology sector, things became really interesting, because then I was like, let's work on, I and my dear friend, DJ Rhythma, was like, because we're working with Microsoft at the time, is like, let's have KEXP and which they became KCMU, then KEXP, become this kind of like test case for this new technology. Let's see what we can do because the internet was just coming up, things were getting really interesting. Let's build let's bring in these tools that are usually made for car companies or other industries, because it's Microsoft. They make stuff for everything, and use this to how to do the first uncompressed streaming, how to start working on this thing called YouTube. Because you have to understand, when YouTube first launched, it almost shut down because nobody knew what to do with it. It's like, you want me to make a video and put it on the internet for what? Like, my life isn't interesting. What am I doing here? The first year that we had KEXP on YouTube, we asked a whole bunch of bands. I think like maybe 10 said yes to that, because we weren't paying. So it was like, why would I come into this little radio station and do a show and play when I could be just relaxing, having a coffee in my hotel, getting ready for the show that's actually paying me? Next year was 300. Now everybody wants to do a KEXP session. But the first year it was all like brand new. So I helped with people that I was working with to help the station grow. The other part was we were part of the University of Washington. So the university had our license. And if you remember, there was like booms and busts. And so the university is publicly funded university that has a radio station. The radio people aren't really going into radio as a career. The university is seeing an economic downturn. So they're okay, let's sell this thing so we can make money and provide computer technology, linguistics, other things that students in 2005, 2008 want to learn. So we were able to form a board and an organization to get the license from the university. We have a relationship. We're still together, but we now control our fate. Because we have the license, and the station isn't funded by the government. The station isn't funded by commercials. We're funded by listeners, from all over the world that give us anywhere from like $10 a year to $1,000 a year, and there's thousands of them, and that's how we stay, honest, and we're able to experiment and do a whole bunch of stuff at a time when you don't even need radio. When you think about this, when I started doing radio, I had a record collection, and I played a lot of music from different parts of the world because I bought that music and I traveled. Now you could do radio without owning a single record because everything is files and streams per se. We have a great library and stuff like that, but a lot of stuff is just files. Um, and if you hear a song, more often than not, you Shazam it, or you can go on any streaming platform and get that. That would have been impossible back then. It would have been like if you heard a song somewhere, you would need to, I remember I heard something. This is amazing. I have a memory of this song. I don't know how to find it. I don't know what it is, etc. That's all gone now. That mystery's gone. If you listen to something and it's not Shazamable, that's rare. If you find a piece of music and you can't find it on a streaming platform, that's super rare. Those are like magical things. But back, that's the way it was. So the fact that KEXP is more popular than ever, and people want to be connected with it, they want to have some type of, like, we make bumper stickers, and they're all over the world. Bumper stickers, stickers that are in the car. Sorry. And then people don't put bumper stickers with Spotify on their cars or on their guitar case or whatever. So it's once again, it's about that sense of community. It's like, what is it about you listening together, coming together, being together, and experiencing this? This is, I think, one of those things. This is one of the reasons why I started SAMA, was just like, I felt like this is interesting. This is an interesting time, and I'm finding that, like even in colleges that still have radio stations, those radio stations are really popular. People, the kids today want to do radio because it's authentic. There's real, like you make mistakes and play. Like I just recently went to a club show with a bunch of young DJs, and they're making train wrecks left and right, and people are loving it because it's real. They're like, wow, it's a real DJ. It's not just pressing a button and bouncing around like a top. So there's that sense of like authenticity, and with that authenticity, there's like randomness, and I think that's the thing that keeps us growing. Like people feel connected to us. It's random. We're professional. It's not like just a bunch of blah, but it's that sense of reality. Like, people make mistakes, we make mistakes, but we're still connected. I hope that answers your question, because I know it was a long one, but I felt like I just needed to go on a tangent on that because these are some of the things that I'm exploring right now.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, that was my question as well. Like, how did you start YouTube? So, like, you answered that. Thank you so much. And I also wanted to ask you about SAMA. How did you come up with the idea, and how it's different to KEXP? Because at KEXP you have performances, and in SAMA you have performances as well. So, like, how is it different, and how you come up with the idea?
SAMA came up because I wanted to bring artists from different parts of the world to the Pacific Northwest and put on shows. As I said before, the live show experience, whether it's like a band or a DJ, is magical. It's alchemical. It's the thing that really works in this space. And as I was saying, a lot of artists just weren't coming through. There just wasn't enough of them here. So I and my friend John Goodfellow was like, okay, let's do this thing. Let's set up a show and let's bring in artists that wouldn't be coming here. This was also at a time during the first Trump administration, where you got a lot of like xenophobia, anti-immigrant. You had the Muslim ban. You had like really crappy comments about countries from that were, just it was just stupid. And I was like, let's bring in artists from those countries and let's find ways to have these artists perform, and so people can see and connect with them on a human level, not as like a political statement. It was like, you suck, this is great, etc. I just wanted to put on these shows and let people make their own decisions, because I've had magical experiences at shows with artists that I don't know where they're from. I mean, I kind of do because this is what I do, but I don't speak the language. I don't know much about the culture, but there was something magical that happened, almost alchemical, like it transmutated my experience. And we ended up going to Australia because I wanted to start bringing in artists from Asia. We're on the Pacific Rim, and COVID hit. And so, as I said earlier, once COVID hit, we were the last plane out of Korea, because we had to find, COVID was hitting hard, and we were trying to find a way to get back to Seattle, back home to my family. It was like, what's going on? And so we went online, and I started doing this because it was the only way that I could continue doing that. Like, I still wanted to bring artists to audiences, but now video streaming and everything became a platform. And it was an experiment. Like, I remember my first show. It was like, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And it was okay. And then I did a next one, and then you could do native recording, and I started bringing different technologies in and everything. But I was stuck at home for 2 years. And the difference is like, they were all live performance like this, like KEXP. But the big difference now is that SAMA is doing live shows, which was always the intention of it. But COVID was a block for that. In that interim, where I live, there's 25% of the area, King County, Seattle, where I live, is immigrants right now. We have a huge Ukrainian population here, Somali, Pakistani, Indian, etc. And I want to bring in artists from those parts of the world to play here, to be here. Interesting thing that I found sometimes in these situations is that once people leave, their relationships with their home country is kind of trapped in amber. I found this especially with the Polish artists and Polish population, because I'm in Poland a lot, and I want to bring in current Polish artists. But a lot of people here, a lot of the immigrants, don't even really know what's going on in Poland. It makes perfect sense. They're living in America, but it's an opportunity for us to actually bring in what's happening there here. I'm starting to see this even with Ukraine, where it's just like, now this is the scene now. This is what's happening here. Let's find a way for you to connect with these artists that are happening in 2025 in these places. So that's kind of one of the big differences. And, it's also, SAMA's my laboratory. I'm experimenting to see what happens here. If the band fits and it's great, then we put it on KEXP. I have to advocate for them. And then also I'm trying to do different things. I just finished my first feature that we filmed all over the world, and I am looking to try different kinds of experiments with video with some of these artists, how to connect with this, things that I couldn't do at KEXP because we're a large institution right now, and there are things that are kind of like, okay, let's try this, let's do this, okay, we're going to do this and this. Where with SAMA I can experiment more. It's kind of like KEXP is my band. I'm doing my work in my band. SAMA is my solo project. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yep, question?
Hello, I'm Marina.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you about the organization, and maybe you could share some challenges as a host. Like, what are your biggest pains? Like, is it communication? Is it like filtering or searching for artists, or I don't know, funding, etc.? Because I mean, it feels like a lot of a lot of organizational work, and the KEXP has been there for a while. And how do you keep going for a long time and not get burnt out, etc.?
Are you talking about KEXP or SAMA?
KEXP.
Okay. With KEXP, we're a large institution. When I started there was one employee, half an employee even. Now we're like 200. We have a significant budget. We're in this huge space, etc. So there's things that happen once you become an institution. There's, politics, bureaucracy, all these things come in, which can deflate you. Everybody out there in the space, it's like it's hard at times, because it's like a family. There are days you're getting along great, and days not so much. As far as burning out and everything else, you have a passion for the music and a passion for the artist. Like you're connecting in a really interesting way. We get to experiment. We just finished a series called Music Heals. And this is an interesting evolution for us as an organization, where we are looking at how music has helped people going through hard times. This one was dealing with cancer. Music heals cancer. We do addiction, we do mental health. And we ask listeners to send us songs and stories that have helped them through these struggles. Sometimes it's them going through it. Sometimes it's a loved one that is dying of cancer or died of cancer. And how did these songs connect? How did these songs actually help you? Now, people listening to this thing, that's therapy. That's like, okay, this is very unexpected in the context of a radio station. You wouldn't have a commercial radio station do that. That'd be kind of insane. And that's, so those moments become really powerful. Also, if you're looking at, and I'm not berating commercial radio stations. It's like you are who you are, and it's wonderful, etc. But it's hard to pivot, because once your songs are programmed, if something happens in the world that's crazy, it's really hard for you to change your programming, especially with commercial radio stations, because they're trying to cut costs. So sometimes there's one DJ working for 10 stations, and he's just reading lines. When something happens in the world, when Russia invaded Ukraine, I did a whole set of Ukrainian music, because I wanted people to feel this. This also happens, I do a show for years that I started in like 1989 when I was in Boston, called Music of People Being Bombed. When the United States decided to bomb Iraq, I played a whole bunch of music from Iraq, because I was like, I need people to feel that these are real people, and music does that. It's an emotional experience, and so that gives me the strength and the energy to continue, because I know I'm making an impact. I'm getting emails back, and people are telling me like, thank you. And especially in the context of what I do, most people don't have passports, but most people never travel. But because they listen to my show, or because they've come to a performance of a SAMA artist that I have coming in, they get the passport, they go there, and then their life changes, because travel changes you. And your ability to see our shared humanity, our connection, becomes evident. And that stuff, that feeds me. That's the thing that keeps me motivated and going. But yeah, always struggle. Fundraising is always hard. We just lost an insane amount of money from the federal government. Luckily, with KEXP and with SAMA, we weren't counting on it. But it's always difficult. It's always like, how do you convince people to check in? You might have a recession, and then everybody's cutting back. It's not boring. And I think that's the most important part. It's not boring. If you're doing something that's really boring, check yourself a little bit, because you have one life,
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Hello, my name is Lib,
Hello.
and you've talked about commercial music and about country music, that it's not quite evolving, it's stagnating. But do you see some tendencies in commercial music, some genres that are gonna change, and something interesting gonna appear, something new in commercial music?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Seattle. When grunge came out, it was not commercial music at all. It became commercial. It became, quite popular for a while, and then something else came up. So it's always going to move. It's always going to change. You're seeing, I'm a DJ. I love electronic music. I've been involved with electronic music since, the mid 80s. There's a genre that came up, a marketing genre called EDM. It was a whole bunch of people came together that decided, let's take all this and put it into a thing. And as soon as you name something and it's marketed, then all the interesting stuff gets cut, because it needs to fit a thing that needs to be sold. And what needed to be sold with EDM was festivals. Because people weren't buying records, they were getting together, which is a beautiful thing, and spending a fortune on water and beer and drugs and everything else, and they wanted to experience a certain thing, the drop, etc. The same thing happened with grunge. Suddenly this thing that was really interesting, unique, became huge, and then it became marketable, sellable records, etc. And it became a thing. So I think it's not a criticism. I think commercial music is great. I listen to commercial music all the time, and it could evolve, and it's always evolving. But I've been in this industry for a long time, and my tastes have evolved, and so I'm looking for stuff in a different way. But I'm always looking for something that can become a hit. I've seen it. I've seen artists. I've witnessed this all the time. And when you think about this in the context of KEXP, we just had Tom York from Radiohead, huge artist, come through, and we're seeing these artists come through and want to play here. Obviously, Taylor Swift is not going to play KEXP because it would be a madhouse, and but others, can come through and can come in. It could become interesting. I'm curious to see what happens. How do you go from your own little group to become gigantic? And then, time passes and you shrink again. That's why it's super important to be nice to everybody, because you meet people coming up and coming down. That is so true. And then, and then see how that evolves and see what happens. The way music is made is really interesting. The adoption of auto-tune, the adoption of the looper. What is the next technology? I work in AI right now, and I'm seeing really interesting things with AI as an accompaniment to artists, like the way a drum machine was an accompaniment to other artists, and see what happens with that. How are artists going to be making the next thing, and how will that become commercial? These are heady times. So yeah, I think there's a great potential in commercial music. But the thing that I keep leaning on is that commercial music came up at a time when there were more gatekeepers and access to music. I worked at a record store. A hit came out, the record store changed. Everything was about that hit, about that record, because the record labels were paying the record stores, and suddenly we're playing this song 5 times an hour over and over again, because the people coming in here, you want to sell that product. Now, streaming, algorithms, everybody has access to everything anytime, so you're overwhelmed by it. And so how does that come in? How does that pop up? How do you pull those pieces in? It's an interesting thing for commercial radio. It's an interesting time. I have a friend who runs 2 labels. I was just in New York 3 days ago. We had a long conversation about commercial radio and what is coming up and how commercial radio was working. Sub Pop, popular label in Seattle, every year after year has a better a year than before with its artists, etc. It's known for grunge. Hasn't released a grunge record in forever. Mudhoney's still there, but it doesn't really matter. It's like it's the new artists, and they're always thinking about how are they going to support those artists? How are they going to create opportunities for them? Because fundamentally, it's down to touring, if you can. And like, there's a great band called Deep Sea Diver who are doing fabulous work. They just signed to Sub Pop. Sub Pop is doing interesting international music. They released a record with this Turkish artist Gayasu Akiyul. When I was with Jonathan Poneman in Poland a little while ago at the Ministry of Culture, and we were doing a panel, I was telling everybody out there, was like, you got to talk to Jonathan, because he's looking. These labels are looking, because things are interesting. Like, what is the label right now? A lot of artists I know are dropping their labels because everything's on social. So how does the label work? Sub Pop has a store at the airport here. Sub Pop is one of those labels that has a collection of hoodies and T-shirts that they sell all the time, just like KEXP. Warner Brothers, Universal doesn't do that. It doesn't work like that. It's a different kind of model. It's yeah. The long answer to your short question is yes. Commercial can.
Yeah, hello, Derek. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your experience. My name is Nick. I'm a beginner, independent synth-pop, indie-pop artist from Lviv, and I have 2 parts of the question. The first one is, in Ukraine, there's always been talks on whether our local music is relevant and compatible to the European music or just worldwide music. So from your perspective, what qualities should it have in order to be heard abroad? Is it more about physical presence in UK or USA, or is it more about niche genre like Dachabracha you mentioned already, or Stone Jesus, and or maybe our mainstream pop music still have a chance to be heard? Yeah, it's the first one. And the second one is, in your opinion, what do you think is the right way for us Ukrainians to tell the story about living and creating in a middle of wartime? Like, is it in general meaningful and interesting for listeners abroad? And what is the balance to tell our story without being sounding like crazy?
Okay, I'll answer the last part first. Yeah, it's super important right now. It's more important than ever. When I was in Ostrava, and I ended up interviewing Kalush, we talked about that at length, and it was really, really important to tell the story of Ukraine, because the this is a tragic time, but it's also a time where you can tell the story and you have other entities talking about you. You know, it's not just you talking about the music. There's news, there's cycles, things are happening. This is your time to talk about Ukraine, to talk about your music, to stress any music that's coming out of Ukraine right now. This is the time that if I was to speak to your minister of culture, or anybody out there, I would double down and showcase the range of music, the range of the Ukrainian experience, Ukrainian cuisine, Ukrainian film. In Seattle here right now, we just started but the organizations that I help support has a Ukrainian film festival starting, and also has taken over a small space for Ukrainian Cultural Center. This is important because it's good for the expat community to get together and share, but it's also an opportunity for people outside of that community to discover other things about Ukraine that isn't just what they're hearing in the news. This is important because the news cycle will fade and there'll be something else. You see this with Afghanistan, you see this with Syria and others. This is an opportunity for you guys right now to really push all genres. And because it is Ukrainian, as I was talking about when I got to Seattle in 92, and this is a weird analogy because the Ukraine and Seattle are very different thing, but it is interest. And suddenly a lot of bands came here because they wanted to be discovered in Seattle because everybody was talking about Seattle. So a lot of people are talking about Ukraine. It's not even tied to the genres that you're putting out. It's the story of who you are. And I keep leaning into that also. It's your story. And that story could be about the war. That story could be about leaving. That story could be about your history. Like, you know, we had a long conversation with Marina Krut about that. You need to keep telling that story because the technology allows you to localize that story into any language that you want. And you need to take this time to make that viable, because people are going to become curious about you because you're Ukrainian. Obviously, playing live, super important. That's the magic. You get out there if you can and get on stages, open for bands, whether you're playing for 5 people or 500 people or 5,000 people. Get out and play. Use social media as much as possible. Make sure that you're not just reaching your audience, but trying different ways to reach other audiences, other languages, because you can localize it right now. But this is the time. This is the time to do that. And it's also, this is the time for you to collaborate with other Ukrainian artists in other fields and other things that are going on, and reach out to where are the Ukrainian populations in this country or other countries. You know, make that connection, make that work, so that people know what's happening and also what's happening now. And, you know, talk about it, tell the story, release music, put it out as much as possible. This is the time for you to be, you know, if you're not making music, if you're not putting out stuff, you're wasting your time, because this is your moment. Does that make sense?
And the first question is as well, or yeah, covered. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm just saying, it's like you gotta talk about it. This isn't like being crazy. People are curious. They want to know more. They really do. They're connecting. I've been to shows. I put on shows, and people are crying. It's making a connection with them, an emotional connection. And once you have that connection, they're curious. They're interested, because people aren't like. I mean, I have 2 teenage daughters. Their musical tastes range like crazy. Not because they're my daughters, but because they have access to all of this different music. So sometimes artists get too wrapped up as like, well, I'm making this, but is it this? Or this is like, feel what you're making, what you're connecting, just put it out and tell the story around it.
Thank you. We have a question online from Yulia, who is from Crimea, but currently in Kyiv. Darek, what's your predictions for the future of music, radio, and bands? Will technologies change music?
Technology always changes music. This is interesting because I did this panel in Budapest on the future of music. And when you think about, when you think about music and technology, I have records that say on them no synthesizers were used in making this record. Like, because synthesizers were considered to be fake. Now, I don't know any record that's not made, I mean, outside of classical and others, that aren't made using some kind of synthesizer. You have the drum machine, like I talked to you about before. There were bands or samplers. There were bands that had like 9 people because you needed like horn section, you needed other things. They went away. Like, drum machine came out, a band like Cameo had 12 players. There's suddenly 3 players. Now you've got the looper. You guys know what a looper is, right? Okay. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a renowned musicologist. And I asked him, is like a looper an instrument or a crutch? And he said, yes. And it's true. It's like, I could be a great artist by having a looper. I can't sing, but it doesn't matter. It's like auto-tune. I'm a singer. So it's always going to change. And now you've got AI coming in, and some people are saying it's the end of the world, as they did with those other other technologies. Or is it a magical tool, or is it going to create something else? It's always going to change. Yulia, the thing that I stress about this is that this is a very interesting time to make music. This is interesting to experiment, to try different things, because you can. Because you have devices that are cinema-grade cameras, you have access to editing equipment, you have access to recording equipment, you have all this stuff. The only thing that you need to do is do it. The thing that's never changed is hard work. Often in these situations when I'm quoting a friend of mine recently, but this happens to me a lot. When I'm talking to musicians, it kind of distills down to, what's the shortcut? How do I become successful really quickly? There's no such thing. You got to work at it. You got to figure out. You got to connect. You got to put on shows. You got to get stuff out. You got to talk about it. The hard work is always there. There is no shortcut. So this is the most interesting time to do this. I can't imagine a more interesting time to make music and to put that out there, because the gatekeepers are, but it's work. It's hard work. And you have to make that. If you're not willing to do the work, you might want to think about doing something else.
Thank you. Any questions in the room? Okay, one more online question from Leonid. He's very active, from Odessa. Most of us have a good idea about the sound of different decades, from 60s to zeros. What do you think was distinct sound in 2010s and 2020s? What will be the distinct sound?
2010s was, to me, the emergence of festival pressure and culture on this. You saw a lot more electronic music incorporated in this, and also you saw the emergence of the domination of genres such as reggaeton. That originated from Jamaica and then moved to Puerto Rico, and they became ubiquitous all over the world. So that sound to me became interesting, as in you didn't need it coming from the West in that particular way. You didn't need the that pressure coming in. the like, you know, like you didn't need this giant system of, okay, we're going to make it sound like rock and this and that. It became really interesting to me, especially. And then from a sound perspective, coming up right now, I think you're going to see a pretty intriguing influence of K-pop. K-pop as a aesthetic, K-pop as a business, K-pop as a sound and how it's working. You're going to see more of that play itself out in really interesting way, and experimentation around that, like you where you see the influence of TikTok and whatever's going to come after that, and how people are connecting with it and how they're sharing. You're seeing bands, you're seeing artists bubble up in really interesting ways. I don't know if you guys know the kind of like the jazz beat artist called Berlioz. Was doing nothing, just a bedroom DJ, and then he put out a couple of really sweet riffs on TikTok, and they got picked up by people that put like Penelope Cruz and others on these like riffs, saying like, "You're a broken-hearted Spanish girl walking through the sunset." Became gigantic. I got asked to open for him. I didn't know who he was, and I was like, "Who the hell is Berlioz?" I thought it was a classical composer, and it was a line down the block, and people are like, "I've never experienced something like this." And he put together this little studio ensemble, and it was fun. It was really cool. I enjoyed it. You're going to see stuff like that coming in, and you're also going to see like, okay, I want to be the next this. I want to be the next this, and that's not, you're never going to be the next thing. You have to be your thing, and I'm curious to see what will come from all of these different things. When I say things like K-pop or reggaeton, and the next thing could be something from Ukraine. It could be gigantic. It could be like a particular song. The bandura could explode in really interesting ways. It's all wide open, because the analogy that I always use is that like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we knew, like if you wanted to do this business, these are the things that you needed to do to get into the business. And once you're in the business, this is the thing that you do in the business. Now it's wide open. We know what was, we don't know what's coming. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I have one more question about the thing that you said at the very beginning, that you have to be like unique. You don't have to try and copy some other people. On the other hand, when young musicians or like upcoming musicians are starting, they're actually told that like, okay, you don't fit our radio station because we are strictly pop, or we are strictly rock, or we're strictly electronic. Also, when you want to pitch yourself to different playlists, they are like, okay, did you hear our music? It's all like, kind of a pattern of the same thing. So it's really complicated for an upcoming musician, like musician who are just starting out, you're trying to be unique, but everyone tries to push you and like get you into the box. So like sometimes you just give up because, I'm trying to be this, I'm trying to be that, like, and you just like burn out and you stop doing it. I don't know. Do you have any advice like how to balance it out somehow?
You need to do the work on building your audience. Getting onto a radio station will not help you build the audience in a kind of way that will connect you and give you that sustainability with that audience. I'll use hip hop as an example. Hip hop grinds through artists like crazy. You could be huge for a month and then you're out. Nobody remembers you. Nobody's going on. So you need to do the work to build that particular audience, and then once you have a little bit of that radio station will start paying attention to you, because when algorithms, whoever's running the algorithm will be or the playlist will be trying to get be curious about you. They're going to check you out online. Like I'm in the middle of hiring a couple of people for SAMA, and people are sending me their CVs, which is great. I'm checking them out online. I'm like, who are you? What are you doing? What is interesting about you? If I'm going to be working with you, I need to kind of like you, and we need to have stuff to talk about. Like, and I think the magic for any upcoming artist right now, to keep you from burning out and keep you and make you interesting to commercial radio and everything else, is if you build your your presence in there. And some artists are like, it's exhausting. It is exhausting. And I don't want to do social media. Nobody wants to do social media. But this is the new tool. If you learn how to make music, you need to learn how to do this too. And then you will be able to bubble up and play a role here. Because once again, you're dealing with crazy numbers. The amount of music that's being generated and made right now, for you to bubble up from that, you got to think about your story. And then how do you build that story? How do you use the tools that allow you to make that story happen? And I keep stressing, I'm older. I've been through this a long time. Being a great artist and reaching me in the 90s would have been impossible, because how do I get your demo? Everything started changing for me a lot when I was, when people started to record music on cell phones, and they would send those recordings to me via Skype. They were at a festival in Mali, and I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to start playing this right now. And then WhatsApp. People started recording stuff. This is phenomenal. I'm going to put it on the air right now because this is something I've never heard before. This is something really interesting and unique. And then you're talking about even legacy artists. I just got a couple of records of synth pop from the 80s from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan and Turkmenistan when it was part of the Soviet Union, but they got their synthesizers, and they started doing really interesting stuff with that. Like there are like DJ nights right now of synth music from Ukraine. I got a Light in the Attic, a great label, just released a whole bunch of really cool stuff last year from Ukraine, stuff that nobody ever heard before. It was like really interesting stuff that was going on in your country in the 80s and the 90s that would have never been out, would never have been heard unless somebody went to Kyiv and went into a shop and found a bunch of old cassettes and brought them back to me. Now stuff is available. So it's just the ability to tell your story, share that story, and get that reaction. And that's the thing that I think is most important. You guys probably know this, but I'll say it anyway. When you say social media, people just think about the media. It's the social. If somebody's talking to you, comment, answer them back, communicate them, build that thing. Lean on the social as well as you're leaning on the media.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions in the room? No, or no more questions in online. I'm just going to ask one last question. How did you discover Daha Braha and Dah Daughters and Marina Krut? Was it like personal connection or an email, or like how did that happen?
I discovered Daha Braha through my friend Artur Rojak, who throws the Off Festival in Katowice. And he said, this is amazing, because they were there. I wasn't there. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. Let me go check this out. And it was like, okay, this is really cool. Marina was through a personal connection. My friend Rafa, before WOMEX is a great conference of world music and international artists in every different cities in each year. It was in A Coruña in Spain, and Rafa put together, and Rafa is from Ukraine. His family's from Ukraine originally. He put together like a gathering of people like myself, and Marina was playing, and it was like, okay, this is really cool. Let's figure out a way to bring her in. And Doc Daughters came through Doc Abraka. They have the same manager. They're more theater oriented, and I was blown away by how they could perform. The things that I love theater, and I love artists that know that they're on stage. That's another thing that's super important for any up and coming artist. When you're on stage, you're on stage. Put yourself together. Like people want you to succeed. And I wanted Doc Daughter and Doc Abraka and others to succeed. And one of the things that I've discovered that I saw sometimes in these situations was like, sometimes artists don't realize that they're on stage, that they have an audience. Think about that. Think about what you're wearing. Think about what you're saying. Think about how you're going to engage these artists. Like when you look at K-pop artists, which is one of the things I was stressing about before, everything is scripted. Like, you're trying to get this audience to connect with you on a real tangible level. So it's like theater. It's like, what are you saying? How are you connecting with people? As soon as you get off the stage, talk to your audience, connect with them, do selfies, make sure that they know what's happening. And the other part that's super important is like if you're an artist and you're from Ukraine, talk about your country, talk about the city, talk about the other artists that are doing great work and that are doing this beautiful art and building the scene. Like fundamentally, the thing that I stress with a lot of artists is like, I want you to encourage me to go visit your city as a tourist, to go see you, to perform you, to spend money at your restaurants, to go visit, to go experience, because I want you to be a conduit to get people really interested and curious and want to feel something about you.
Thank you. And I want you all to take a look at Darek's t-shirt. This is a t-shirt of Dacha Bracha from the very first tour in the US. Yeah, so it's not available anymore, but Darek has it.
I love this shirt. Yeah. I love I paid for this shirt. It's like, that's one of the things that's also important as a business. You got to think about what you're investing in, like, because people will, even though they could get it for free, people want to help you. As I said before, people will buy your CDs or whatever you've got, even if they have nothing to play it on, because they want a connection.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Darek, for sharing your wisdom as early as 8 a.m. in Seattle. We really appreciate it.
Anytime.
You're a super busy person, and I think everyone is super grateful. Let's give it up to Darek.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So much.
And maybe you can share with us the references that you said, the musical ones, the musical scenes, so that we can share it with everyone from different countries that you found inspiring.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming, everyone. Thank you, America House Lviv, for hosting us today. And thanks to Darek again. Hopefully you will have a great Friday today.
Perfect. I look forward to seeing you guys in Ukraine soon.
Brilliant. Please come over.
We do. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.